Smell, smell. Yeah. So some quick background on the sense of smell. It was one of the earliest distant senses to evolve, and a distant sense is a sense where you are sensing the environment around you for things that are not immediately in your vicinity. So vision actually evolved much later than sense of smell. Sense of smell is also very well developed in lower animals. Those are animals closer to the ground, and nocturnal animals, animals that are staying awake at night. And that just makes a lot of sense because they're not depending on their eyes or their sense of touch. They're depending on their sense of smell to help them survive. Smell also evokes emotional reactions, resulting in very strong either avoiding behaviors or approaching behaviors. So they can stimulate a very positive emotion or a very negative emotion. It helps you regulate your appetite as it is connected to your sense of taste and to your hypothalamus, which helps you regulate your digestion. It's also involved in identifying things necessary for survival, including the rejecting of things that are bad. So the receptors involved with smell are your chemoreceptors, and these are the receptors that are responding to chemicals dissolved in liquids, typically gases. This is what's called a special sense in that it is only, these receptors are only found in your head, whereas something like thermoreceptors are found all throughout your body, so that's a general sense. There are approximately 12 million specialized cells in your nasal cavity for your sense of smell. And like I said before, your sense of smell and your sense of taste are very intertwined. And that's why when you have a stuffy nose, you can't taste much because about 75 to 80% of flavor is derived from your sense of smell. So here's just a general diagram of the olfactory bulb. So starting over here on the right, just to give you a sense of what we're looking at. So this is a profile view of a person. So here's their nose here, their mouth here, their eyes are up here. And this is their teeth up here. And this is the nasal cavity. So at the very top of the nasal cavity, embedded within the ethmoid bone, is the olfactory bulb. And this is where all of your chemoreceptors are found for your sense of smell. So zoomed in over here, we have the olfactory bulb. This is the ethmoid bone with our cribriform plates. And in between the cribriform plates, our olfactory receptor cells kind of protrude out. In between those olfactory receptor cells, we have simple columnar epithelial cells, and those are general support cells. At the ends of our olfactory receptor cells, you can see it better over here. So here's our receptor cells, and here in the pink is our simple columnar cells. So these are the dendrites of those sensory cells. At the ends of those dendrites, they have cilia. Now those cilia are where the protein receptors are found, where the sense smells will bind to cause different sensations. There she is. There's about 12 million of these sensory olfactory receptor cells, and then on each one of those there's about 10 to 20 cilia. So that is many, many, many receptors for these odorants. So odorant molecules are the chemicals that are stimulating, ooh, you just got bigger, that are stimulating the olfactory receptors, and they enter the nasal cavity as a gas. But those gases cannot directly bind to the cilia on the receptor cells, so what they have to do is partially dissolve. And they can do that because there is a mucus layer right outside the cilia. If you look back here, so right here, this mucus layer, and then we have our cilia. So the gases will dissolve partially in that cilia, and then they can diffuse through and bind to the cilia, the protein receptors on the cilia. And what happens is when the odorants bind to those receptor proteins, it causes that cell to depolarize because that cell is a neuron. And when that cell depolarizes, we reach threshold, we reach action potential, we send the impulse along the sensory neuron. So just a reiteration, they must bind to receptor sites on those hair-like cells, which is the cilia. So here we have our olfactory sensory neuron dendrite. Here are the cilia. Zooming in on just a part of the cilia, here we have receptor proteins. And they're very, very puzzle-like, so they will only bind to specific odorants, and you have approximately 500 different types of receptors. So they can either respond to very specific molecules, or they can be in combination, so we can bind to multiple receptors for one smell. So odorants are coded by a combination of those receptors. Like I said, there's approximately 500 different types of receptors, and this is called a recognition profile. So the scent for banana could stimulate receptors numbers 2, 4, and 7, and garlic will bind to receptors 1, 5, and 9 to cause that garlic smell. So you can look at this person smelling a lily. Here's the olfactory bulb. Here are their sensory neurons, the cilia, and there's looks to be about 3 or 4 different types of odorants that are all combined to create the lily smell, and they bind all to their specific receptors on the cilia. And then you associate all of those together to create that one smell. So here again we're showing the path of an odorant molecule through to send an impulse to the brain. So the odorant molecule will bind to its receptor on the cilia. That will cause this neuron to reach threshold, send its action potential. The impulse will go through. The glomerulus is a spherical structure where these olfactory sensory nerves will synapse with the mitral cells. So this is just an area where these two cells synapse. A mitral cell is a neuron that connects the olfactory neurons directly to the brain, and it typically goes directly to the limbic system. So here we can see from this the nasal cavity and the olfactory bulb, it will be sent to the entorhinal cortex, which is responsible for your memory and navigation, and also be sent to your amygdala and hippocampal complex, which is responsible for your memory and emotions. This is why you tend to have scent memories, and why you can have great nostalgia over different scents from your past. This is also why certain odors can change your mood really easily for certain people. Like certain smells will make you feel very relaxed really quickly, very happy, or very angry, because your sense of smell is very intertwined with your memory and your emotions. So an action potential occurs when 7 to 8 odor molecules bind to that specific receptor. So that's how much stimulation you need to reach threshold. Roughly 40 of these nerve impulses must occur for a smell sensation to be reported. And if it's a faint smell, air with those gas particles is not going to naturally go over that nasal cavity where those cilia are. So sometimes you have to smell harder and get closer. We have about 12 million olfactory sensory neurons, and those are split between the left and our right nostrils. And then just in comparison, some dogs, they have a better sense of smell than us, and they have about 220 million olfactory sensory neurons. And I looked it up, bloodhounds have approximately 4 billion olfactory sensory neurons. So it's not the strength of a single neuron, it's the number of neurons that an organism has that determines how well their sense of smell is. After the impulse is sent, it will go to the mitral cell, and the mitral cell will relay the impulse either to any of these areas. So we can go to the limbic system to evoke emotion, the hypothalamus to increase or decrease appetite based on sense of smell, the olfactory cortex to recognize the scent, so it integrates it with your memories, and the association cortex, which compares it to other sensory data. Is what you're smelling in tangent with what you're seeing, what you're feeling, what you're hearing? So here's a diagram showing someone who is smelling barbecue. It goes to all these parts of the brain. So it evokes emotions based on their memories with barbecues. Maybe there's an autonomic response associated with barbecues, like salivating. Motivation, so this is your hippocampus area, involved with reward based on your memories and experiences with barbecue, the reward being food. And also association is what you're seeing. Do you see the barbecue? Do you taste a hamburger? All work in tangent with you smelling the barbecue. Um, Smell is much, much, much more sensitive than taste, meaning we can detect a smell um, in very small parts more than we can a taste. So something called methyl mercaptan, which is a very putrid smell, the smell of death, we can detect that in one part in 30 billion. And people can detect about 10,000 different odors. And here's just different odorant categories. So we have from ethereal smells, resinous smells, spicy, fragrant, putrid, and there's also burned smells. And these are the main categories. Some differences between sensitivity mean rats are 8 to 50 times more sensitive to odors than humans. They are those lower animals, and they are also semi-nocturnal, so they're depending on their sense of smell way more than their sense of sight. Dogs can be 300 to 10,000 times more sensitive, and it's genetic, so it depends on the breed of dog, and that determines how sensitive they are to smells. But like I said before, it's not the individual receptor. So the individual receptors from organism to organism are all equally sensitive. It's the number of receptors that determines how sensitive we are to smells. Here are some different smells and our thresholds. So how many parts per billion does there need to be for us to detect the odor? So you can see methanol, we need 141,000 parts per billion to detect that. You can go all the way down to T-butyl mercaptan, that's that putrid smell. We need about 0.3 parts per billion to detect that odor. More facts about sensitivity. Women generally have lower thresholds than men, meaning we tend to smell things before men do. Sorry, we, yes. Especially during ovulation. And our sensitivity is also heightened during pregnancy. And then there are professional smellers, so there are professional perfumers, also wine tasters. They can distinguish up to 100,000 odors, whereas the average person can distinguish 10,000. There's also something called durability, which is, I relate to reliability, where we can recognize a smell even after several days, month, or a year, and we can pinpoint that smell with accuracy. We've been talking about adaptation, meaning the sensory neuron will stop firing after a while. So smell adapts really quickly. So one smell, when you smell it for a while, the sensory neuron will stop firing, meaning while the stimulus is still there, you are not smelling it anymore. And then if you smell something else, that smell will mask the first. So strong odors mask weak odors. So we smell one odor at a time. So you can hold up two different odors to both nostrils and only smell one smell, depending on their strength. Identifying smells is pretty difficult because we don't have many verbal labels for smell. There are fewer words for experience of smells than we have to other sensations. For example, if I asked you to describe these top two colors, you can easily do so by comparing them to other things. If I asked you to describe the smell of a rose or describe the smell of a banana, that is much more difficult to do using our words. And scientists have tried to discover why, and it's because the sense of smell and language are very disconnected. So our olfactory information doesn't even go through the thalamus, which is where we integrate everything. It goes directly to the cortex or the limbic system. And a lot of our olfactory processing occurs on the right side of our brain, while our language processing, our Broca's and our Wernicke's, is occurring on the left side of the brain. So they are never integrating with each other. Other interesting facts, aromatherapy does really work. So certain smells cause certain moods. Also, pheromones are chemical hormones released through the skin and detected by olfactory neurons. So men smelling women can cause testosterone levels to go up. Men smelling women smelling men can cause estrogen levels to go up. And women smelling women can also cause our menstrual cycles to sync. Other tidbits, women more sensitive than men. Some diseases have smells, etc. And also our nostrils switch on and off, which is very interesting.